Español, tú no entiendes. Tú eres china. Las chinas no hablan español.
Ay, no seas grosero conmigo.
Ahora nos toca los tacos.
No, güey, quiero una torta.
Immigration and Custom Enforcement, please have your identification ready. Por favor.
No, no corras, güey. Quédate ahí sentado. Hey, Diego.
Don't run, sir. Don't forget! Stay where you are!
In every language, we hope you're having a wonderful morning listening to Radio CHIRLA in your car, at home, or at work.
Yeah, but nowadays people are scared to go to work.
Brothers and sisters, no matter where you are from, this is your home now, and nobody should be afraid to be at home.
Especially when you're actually at your house. Could you believe all these raids, Fuerza? Coming into people's homes in the middle of the night or early in the morning.
I wish they would come to my house without a warrant.
My door stays closed unless they have a warrant signed by a judge with my name on it.
Unless it's a search warrant, right? Because then they only need the address to search?
But if they're looking for me, the warrant's gotta have my name on it.
I heard that. Mi gente, sepan sus derechos.
Know your rights, people. Know your rights.
Hola, mijo. Buenos días. ¿Cómo amaneciste?
Muy bien, Erika. Buenos días.
Buenos días. Bien, también, gracias a Dios. ¿Un cafecito?
Sí, por favor.
Ok. Claro que sí. ¿Quién?
Immigration Customs Enforcement, open the door.
Pregúntale si tienen una orden de arresto.
¿Qué?
Firmada por un juez. No vayas a abrir la puerta, estaban hablando de esto en el radio.
¿Tienen una orden de arresto?
Abra la puerta, solo le queremos hacer unas preguntas.
Si no tienen una orden de arresto, no voy a abrir la puerta.
We just need you to sign these papers as proof that we were here. I'm gonna slide them under the door.
Firme las últimas 2 páginas donde está indicado.
No vayas a firmar nada. Puede ser una orden de deportación.
No voy a firmar nada si no sé exactamente de qué se trata.
That's right. Stay calm, stay aware.
And remember, everyone has a right to remain silent.
License, registration, and proof of insurance, please.
Okay, I'm getting the registration.
Driver's license and proof of insurance, please. I need to see your driver's license. What is your name, miss? I'm asking you a question.
Do I need to answer you?
You need to tell me your name.
Ming Liang.
Step out of the vehicle, please. Stand right over here. Where were you born?
没关系，慢慢来，呼吸，不用讲话，会好。
Do you have a green card?
I will not answer that.
I want to speak to a lawyer.
I'm going to impound your car. Your court date is here on your citation. You're free to go.
So the local police can't ask you where you're from or what your immigration status is?
Cops can ask you anything they want, but whatever you say can be used against you.
Come on, let's go. Come on, move. Move. You over here. You. Yeah. Stand right there. There. Over here. Come on. Stand right there.
It's okay to say your name, Fuerza. Just don't say anything else.
Where were you born?
Korea.
Did you arrive in this country illegally?
¿Cuál es su nombre?
Lucía.
¿Cómo entró a los Estados Unidos? ¿Entró ilegalmente?
Sí. Por favor, señor, no me arreste. ¿Quién va a cuidar de mis niños? Tengo un niño chiquito que le está dando de mamar. Se va a morir de hambre.
What's your name? Your name. Le estoy dando esa tarjeta porque no deseo hablar o tener más contacto con usted. Yo elijo ejercer mi derecho de mantenerme callado y me niego a contestar sus preguntas. Si me arresta, seguiré ejerciendo mi derecho a mantenerme callado y a negarme a contestar sus preguntas. Quiero hablar con un abogado antes de contestar cualquier pregunta.
People, you have to have a plan. If you are arrested, you need to have a plan.
Talk to your neighbors, your friends, your family about what they should do in case you are detained.
Think of your children or even your parents. Who will take care of them if you are not there? Lakas, ready to run it down for the people?
Sure. Remember, we all have rights whether we are undocumented or not. If immigration authorities come to your home, the important things to remember are: do not let anyone in unless they have a warrant, an arrest warrant with the name of the person they are looking for signed by a judge, or a search warrant with a specific address also signed by a judge. Do not sign any documents.
If you're pulled over, remember, local police should not be enforcing immigration laws. Also, you are not required to give any information on where you were born or how you entered the U.S.
At the workplace, if there's a raid, remember, don't run. Stay where you are. Always carry a number of a lawyer in case you are taken into custody, and never present false documents to any official, police or immigration. In fact, do not carry false documents around.
And what's most important?
Stay calm, keep quiet. If they ask for your name, you have to say it. But whatever else you say to defend yourself can get you deported. Remember, know your rights, and always have a plan in case of an emergency.
We have a constitutional right to remain silent, organize, and fight for change.
For more information, log into our website, www.chirla.org, or call our hotline at 1-888-6-CHIRLA.
Good evening, everybody. Once again, I want to say thank you to the Scripps College Humanities Institute for inviting me here tonight and engage in a conversation about immigrants, immigration, and enforcement in our times. And I thought it was important for you to see the video because I wanted to have you have a sense of some of how enforcement happens in our communities and in our neighborhoods, and in terms of both at the work site, at the home, as well as by local law enforcement. And so I'm going to touch on these issues throughout my presentation. And my hope is that after I present both the work of CHIRLA, the state of immigrants in California and in our nation, as well as some of the background information as to why we are at this juncture, that through the dialogue and our conversation, I can answer even more of your questions. Let me begin by introducing myself and letting you know a little bit more about who I am. I am the executive director of the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. I am also an immigrant myself. I am a proud immigrant from Mexico. And as Monica stated earlier, I came here when I was a small child to be reunited with my father and my mother, who had come earlier to seek a better life. The experience that I had coming to this country was as a small child, not going through a consular office and then going through an immigration system, but instead entering the country in the dark of night, and also with the support of a coyote. That's my first image of coming to the United States, because I came here undocumented to be reunited with my parents, who were also undocumented. Enforcement is very much part of my life and my own personal history. My mom worked at a garment factory, my father in construction. And when I was about 11 years old, my mother was working at that garment factory. And very similar to what you saw on the video, her factory was raided. She was detained alongside an uncle and an aunt, and then deported back to Mexico. That was my connection to immigration. Didn't understand immigration law. I just knew that my mother, the person that I loved the deepest, had been taken away. And I also saw my father, who was absolutely torn apart by what had happened, and just felt like he could not protect our family from what had happened. My mother finally was able to come back to us in a very difficult situation, back to be with us here in the United States. But my father, what he did is he sought out assistance. He looked for help to figure out how we could legalize our status in this country, and he did. And he connected to an organization that helped him figure out how my family could be protected from immigration enforcement. We legalized through a program that used to exist, that no longer exists, but once we arrived here, I had a brother who was born here in 1974. He was a U.S. citizen, and to protect him and his well-being, we were able to legalize our status. This program, what it did was it allowed my father, my mother, and his two sisters, who were undocumented, legalize. We were able to legalize our status, and our life changed. We were able to do so in the early 80s, but this program in 1976 was taken away. And since that time, you cannot legalize your status even if you have a sibling who is under 21. So that has changed, and that which we were able to do today, others cannot. I am the eldest daughter in my family, and I have seen through my parents' life as immigrants how they were treated in the workplace and in society, both in terms of low wages, many times being exploited in the workplace without being paid what they had earned. I did not understand immigration law. I did not understand immigration history in the United States. This is what I lived. And it wasn't until I got to college when I began to read and understand our American history, when I understood immigration law, and when I met other young people like myself, that I finally connected my story to something bigger, to something that was beyond just my particular family, but it was about many other families and many other young people like myself who were going through this. I grew up in the age of Proposition 187 in the mid-90s, when California was at the vanguard of anti-immigrant proposals and anti-immigrant legislation. I was in college actually had graduated college when in the state of California, voters passed Proposition 187, which basically stated that anybody, that children who were kindergarten through high school could not have access to that education, and that individuals who worked in clinics and in other government offices would have to report individuals who were undocumented. When this passed in 1994 and then became, would then be implemented in 1995, this sent a shockwave to immigrant families. I began to work at CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, right after Proposition 187 was passed. I was in charge of the hotline that we still see, that you saw on the video. And that hotline, I would answer the phone calls of panicked families, panicked individuals who did not understand what their life was going to be like moving forward. I also received the phone calls of many U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents and others who were not undocumented, but who actually saw what we called hate unleashed, and where we had 227 cases of individuals who were U.S. citizens, sometimes third, fourth generation, who would not be served at restaurants, who would not be served at private businesses, that would not be even, their money wouldn't even be taken at banks right after Proposition 187 passed. And they were all U.S. citizens or legally in the country. So that the issue of immigration, what I want to convey to you, it is about immigration status, but it's also about race and ethnicity, and it's about the most important question in our country, which is always, who is America, and who belongs in our country. And this has been an issue that we were dealing with in 1995. It's an issue that has been dealt with many years before, but it's also the issue that we're dealing with today. Let me tell you a little bit about CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. So CHIRLA was founded in 1986 to advance the human and the civil rights of immigrants and refugees. And as described by Monica, we have a variety of programs. So the first thing is that CHIRLA organizes immigrants directly and engages immigrant workers, whole families, and as well as immigrant youth, to have an active role in the decisions and in the advancement of their rights. So we work with immigrants to make sure that they are not invisible in their own movement, but they're front and center in the immigrant rights movement. So it's not about, it's organizing is about developing the leadership of immigrants to have a say in the policy and the debates that affect their lives. So we've been organizing workers and families and immigrant students for over 3 decades. In the 90s, late 90s, we actually began organizing immigrant youth. Immigrant youth, because after Proposition 187, we also had another change in the law, and this was at the federal level. So our immigration law changed once again in 1996, which made it even more difficult for individuals to legalize their status, but also, as it's relevant to immigrant youth, in addition to the immigration law, there was a change in the welfare, what is now called welfare reform, the welfare reform law, and that curbed access to higher education for undocumented youth. So what I was seeing, even though my parents came undocumented, I became undocumented, I was undocumented, I was able to legalize, and then I was able to go to college. What I was seeing when I was working at CHIRLA is a whole just generation of young people who were coming to our organization with their parents who now did not have access to higher education, because now they were considered, even though they were considered out-of-state residents, even though they had grown up in the state of California or in their home state. And so they didn't have access to higher education. It was very painful to see young people who were doing everything their teachers told them, everything their parents told them to do in terms of education and good citizenship, and yet they didn't have access to college. So we began to organize these young people to have a voice and to fight for that access to education. Because we organized immigrant youth in 2001, the state of California was one of the first states to actually create in-state college tuition program, which basically recognized young people who had lived in the state, had gone to our high schools and our elementary schools, and recognized them as residents for purposes of lower tuition. They had no access to federal financial aid or state financial aid. They would still struggle, but access to college was now possible, but it was because they got involved. CHIRLA's policy and advocacy is at the local, state, and national level. And our main fight at the national level is to reform our immigration laws. We want our immigration laws to be more modern, to recognize the world we live in. We want our immigration laws to be more just and humane and to be actually workable. When we say we want to change, recreate our immigration laws, what do we mean? We mean, first and foremost, that our immigration laws should permit legal migration and equal access to legal migration. Right now, we have a system that actually favors certain European countries over immigration from Latin America, from the Caribbean, from Africa, or from Asia. And many of our policies as they exist today make it almost impossible for many of our families to actually have access to the legal system. We need to change that. And even if you do have access to the legal system, if you are from countries like Mexico, India, China, and in the Philippines, many times, even if you do have that access because of family relationships, many times the wait time is decades long. So if you're a legal permanent resident and you're asking, or a green card holder, and you're trying to petition a family, your spouse or your children, many times that'll be an average of 16 years. The Philippines, because this number is so shocking, but if you're from the Philippines and you want to petition your brother and sister, we're now at, the wait is 27 years. So that even the legal system as it exists, those who have the potential to have access to it many times have to wait decades and to actually be reunited with family members. What we want is a system that recognizes the 11 million individuals who are living and working in our country. So when we talk about immigration reform, the recreation of immigration laws, we're talking about legalizing 11 million people who are our neighbors, who are our friends, who live in our country. In the state of California, out of the 11 million, 25% live in the state of California. So if we are Californian, it's very likely that that we know somebody who is undocumented in our, who's part of our family, who is our neighbor, our friend, or coworker. We want to make sure that our system is also open and really recognizes the need to offer humanitarian assistance and opens our doors to refugees. At this moment, there's a global crisis in which we have so many vulnerable communities fleeing from war, fleeing persecution, and our system is set up to not open the doors to those refugees, the women and children, the most vulnerable in our society and our world, for protection. By not allowing refugees to enter, I want you to understand that people will die. Their life will be lost. So it is a matter of life and death when we talk about refugees. And many people think that the United States takes many refugees, that it's very generous. I want you to understand that right now, in this world, we have 250 million migrants, many of whom are refugees. Germany took in over 1 million refugees. The United States is unwilling to take more than 50,000 under this administration. That's not acceptable. We're a global community, and we need to recognize that people are in peril. People need to that we need to be accountable to our fellow human beings. And that's what we mean when we say immigration reform. It's about rethinking our immigration system and understanding our American immigration system better. We also want to make sure that immigrants actually, their labor, their civil, and their constitutional rights are actually respected. So right now you saw a video that we use for our community education and outreach program so that individuals understand what rights they do have, even though they are in the country undocumented, that they are protected by the Constitution, that they do have a right to legal counsel, that they do have a right to due process. So that way they can assert those rights and, most importantly, stay with their families. Today, I have to say, it's clear to us that our immigrant community is in a state of crisis. President Trump and this administration has demonstrated over and over again that it does not respect us, it doesn't seek to represent us, and instead seeks to use us as scapegoats to win points with a xenophobic and nationalist base. Xenophobic, the fear of immigrants, the fear of foreigners, nationalist, those who want to close borders and who also believe that a certain race of individuals is superior to others. What's our evidence based, what do we base this evidence on? And first and foremost, the first action of this president and the administration was to issue executive orders, 3 executive orders that seek to harm our community. The first one on interior enforcement. It sought to increase the number of ICE agents that exist in order to enforce immigration laws. So the video that you saw ICE agents going to individuals' homes. More enforcement, that means more ICE agents that exactly go to people's homes at night or very, very early in the morning, at 4 o'clock, at 5 o'clock in the morning when everybody else is asleep, but families are picked up, individuals are picked up. And so what the first executive order does is increase in interior enforcement. It also does one more thing, which was something that President Obama was able to do after much pushing. I want to be very clear, after we pushed him very hard, was that there's such a thing called prosecutorial discretion, which is basically to make a determination as to how you were going to use your enforcement dollars, and to allow for discretion in the application of enforcement in immigration law, to recognize that individuals have deep roots in this country, that they're the parents, the spouses of U.S. citizens, and to give individuals an opportunity to fight their case, but to have that level and allow for that level of judgment. The first executive order does away with prosecutorial discretion. It basically says if you're undocumented, you're fair game and you're a target for enforcement. The other thing that the first executive order on immigration does is it seeks to punish what the administration calls sanctuary cities. And so their definition is very broad around sanctuary cities or sanctuary jurisdictions. It basically means is the police department collaborating with ICE in order for the purposes of deportation. And so the first executive order seeks to punish these jurisdictions. The second executive order is all about border enforcement. This is the famous Build the Wall executive order. The executive order seeks to put more money in the hands of Border Patrol, and again, to build this wall. But the other thing that hasn't been discussed as much is that it also seeks to increase detention centers or immigration jails, to massively increase these centers in which people are going to be detained. This week, the requests for proposals of for certain jurisdictions were opened up to say, we want to build jails in your immigration jails in your jurisdiction. So in Texas, in Illinois, Tennessee, and other places, the government is saying, we're open to you building and constructing more of these detention centers. And finally, the one that you heard so much, that we all have heard so much about, that there has been so much outrage about, which is the Muslim ban, and as well, I want to say the refugee ban. So it's two things. It's about the ban on people because of their country of origin. It's because of their religion. But the other thing that, again, has not been as fully discussed is it also seeks to further diminish the numbers of refugees that this country accepts. And that as a global, again, a member of the global community takes responsibility for protecting. What other evidence do we have about the lack of respect and the attack on our communities? Just on September 5th, we had the rescinding of DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. That's going to leave 800,000 immigrant youth without protection. This program was instituted in 2012 to make sure that immigrant youth had a chance at life, that they could actually make sure that they could, first and foremost, that they were protected from deportation, a recognition that they are America's youth, and that they were able to work once they concluded their studies. In the immigrant DACA youth are American youth. They are, and once graduated, they are teachers, they're engineers, they are lawyers. They're working in every single sector of our community, contributing with their tax dollars, contributing with their talent, and contributing to make their communities better, to give back what they also received. But now they have no protection. They need a replacement to DACA, and that replacement is the DREAM Act, a permanent solution. And this is only one step towards our bigger fight, which as I said earlier, which is immigration reform that creates a more just system. But there are other attacks that are coming our way. There is a program called Temporary Protected Status that is basically also given by the administration with the authority of the State Department, which basically gives temporary protected status to individuals when their home country has gone through a major humanitarian or just a disaster. So earthquakes, hurricanes, individuals, and when I mean earthquakes, the Haitian community, there was a horrible earthquake that destroyed a major part of that country. Hurricanes, we've seen that. We've seen what that does just this season. And so individuals from Central America, as well as from West Africa and Haiti, have temporary protected status. People from Central America have had this temporary protected status close to 2 decades. We are clear that one of the other attacks that is coming to our community is to take away temporary protected status. 432,000 individuals are protected by this program, and so they too are fearing the worst. And finally, of course, raids in our community and retaliation against sanctuary policies. This is what we are seeing, this is what we are living, and what I want you to understand is that you can think that these attacks are just against the immigrant community. But I want you in this room to be clear. This is not just about attacking immigrants. It's about attacking a vision of America. It's about really questioning the identity of Americans, of a whole range of Americans who are diverse in every way. And so what I want you to know tonight is that I am asking you to take action, not just in solidarity with immigrants and refugees and with individuals who practice a Muslim religion or who are being attacked because because of who they love, because they're LGBTQ. I want you to really think about this, about you and what you think of yourself as being an American in this country, and what kind of country you want to create, you want to be part of. So it's really important in this moment to understand that the history of this country is a history in which the question of citizenship, the question of who belongs in this country has always been asked. And it's been answered differently, depending on your values and your vision. And what I want you to understand is that our country began with citizenship being defined by just those who were citizens were those individuals who were white and who owned land. That's how our country began in terms of citizenship. And many people have worked really hard to transform the notion of citizenship so it's so much more inclusive, so that more people can belong, so that in fact, American as a definition is broader, it's more inclusive. And here we are once again being asked the same question: who is American? And so I want to say to you, immigrant youth who are documented dreamers, they're American. And it is up to us at this moment to recognize them as our fellow citizens. Maybe they don't have the document that you might have, that birth certificate, which really you have, if you are a US citizen, that you have by an act of luck in terms of where you were born. Or the green card, which is just a simple piece of plastic. It's really important for us to understand that immigrant youth, so deemed dreamers, grew up in this country. Culturally, in every way, they're American. Their families, people like my family, they came to America at their youth. My parents came in their early 20s. My father died in this country. He is buried in this country. And so many times these notions of, again, who's in and who's out have to be questioned. And many courageous Americans have actually answered this question by actually saying affirmatively, more people should belong. More people, African Americans, need full citizenship and deserve full citizenship. Native Americans, the original, our original Americans need to be included. People depend, in every hue, of every, coming from every sector need to be included. And that's what we're being asked today. So when we're having this conversation, and I'm looking really forward to your comments and your questions on this piece, is when we're talking about immigration, don't think it's about somebody else. It's about us. It's about who we are in this country. In California, from the time that I started to where we're at today, lots of things have changed. I started when California was the anti-immigrant state of our country. Now it's the progressive state. We've changed so many policies. Why? Because many young people, many immigrant families, many people of color, many people who believe in justice became involved, got engaged in politics, got engaged in having a say. And things have changed. And we still have a lot of work to do. But just this legislative session, SB 54 passed, and that's the sanctuary, what's called the Sanctuary States, the California Values Act. I want to have at least take a little bit of time just to talk a little bit about what sanctuary is, and what this is, and what SB 54 is, and what it is not. So sanctuary is actually a religious idea, and this idea that comes from the idea of protection. Sanctuary was given to individuals who committed a crime, but then who the punishment was so severe that religious or houses of worship would take the individual in to protect them from that from the punishment that exceeded any violation that they had committed. That's sort of the more biblical and religious sense of sanctuary. Sanctuary was used in the immigration sense in the 80s when immigrants were fleeing from Central America, and if they were to be picked up, they came in undocumented, if they were to be picked up and enforced upon by immigration authorities, they would be sent back to their death, because they were fleeing from the persecution of their government. So many places of worship opened opened up their churches, and immigrants lived there. And so that was sanctuary. Sanctuary again began in 2000 in order to open up spaces now for all those individuals who were now undocumented and who were targets of enforcement. Again, churches opening up their doors for protection. Now, SB 54 is different than that. But it's deemed sanctuary. But why? It's called the California Values Act, but it does something different. What it says is basically it says that our police departments, our sheriffs, should only engage with our communities to protect us from crime and to be of service to the community, not to collaborate with immigration authorities for the purposes of deporting. And that is a value that we hold dear, because everybody, independent of immigration status, can be a victim of a crime, a witness of a crime, and should not fear the police when they are those victims, when they are witnesses of crimes, that they should not fear the police, because then that police officer would engage in collaborate with immigration authorities to deport you. And that's what now, so the administration has basically deemed jurisdictions that say our police department will fight crime, will protect victims of crime, will collaborate with the community to make our neighborhoods more safe. That's what we want our police departments to do, not engage with Department of Homeland Security to identify individuals who are in the country undocumented, and then help ICE and the Department of Homeland Security deport individuals. So what SB 54, the California Values Act, basically puts limits on all of California's local law enforcement officials, our county sheriffs and our different jurisdictions. And what it's saying is we have a value in California in which we want everybody to be safe and be protected. And so that the administration has defined as contrary to their values and to their purpose. And so what we've now heard is, because we passed SB 54, the California Values Act, that we should prepare as early as January for massive raids in the state of California. And we believe that is just wrong. That we have a right to engage with our police departments, and that at the end of the day, if we live in a state where 25% of the population is undocumented, if half the population of the state of California is either an immigrant or a child of immigrants, it makes no sense to have this entire population be fearful of the police. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, and part of the video that I showed you today was what we're doing in our communities in order for individuals to feel safe, but also to understand that when interfacing with the police, they don't have to begin by giving all their information about their country of origin, their status, or anything else that can then, again, help in the deportation and the separation of their families. Over 4 million people have been deported from the United States, okay? 4 million since in the latter part of the administration of President George Bush, with Barack Obama, 2.5, and now with Trump. And those numbers are growing. I would rather be in a situation where we can say 4 million people were legalized in our country, were formally recognized. Their families were able to stay together. They were embraced. Most of the people who are being deported today have 25 years. Their average stay in this country is 25 years. This is their home. And so we need to create an immigration system that is more humane, more just, less punitive. Think about, maybe for you, there are 4 million, you hear 4 million, but think about all the families that have been impacted by these deportations. By this enforcement. Many of these individuals have children who were born in the United States, who are U.S. citizens. I have my niece, whose mother was deported, very similar to the way my niece's, the way that my mother was deported. Their mother wasn't able to come back. She's living in Tijuana. My nieces travel back and forth from here, from Southern California to Tijuana every weekend to be able to see their mom. Their father is a U.S. citizen. He's third generation citizen of the United States. And he tells me, he says, I can't believe that my citizenship, my American citizenship has had, for the past 8 years, has had no value in actually being able to keep my family together. They're fighting to be reunited so they can all live under one home the entirety of their the week. But why do they do that? Because my cousin's husband is a U.S. citizen. This is where his job is, his company is. The girls were staying in Mexico, but they're U.S. citizens, and they're coming so that they can have a better education here. Their mother remains in Tijuana. That's not a way to live, and that is not what we want. We need these families to be together, and we need to recognize the citizenship and the rights of those individuals impacted by these laws. Finally, what I want to tell you is that just because we're here doesn't mean we must always remain here in this moment. I believe deeply that immigrants, U.S. citizens, people of mixed status can organize, can get engaged, can work together so our immigration system works. That it recognizes the humanity of individuals and recognizes that in this world, in this moment, we cannot close our doors and seal them away, but instead that we recognize that human beings move, that people move, that people seek to have better opportunities, that countries that are more open in their immigration system thrive, that California, with the large number of immigrants, is a global power, and that we create immigration systems that we can create an immigration system that reflects our values, and that right now we are being disruptive and destructive to those ideals of liberty and justice for all. We're also answering, and if we continue in this process with this, in the manner in which this administration is moving forward, we're answering the question of who is American by basically making it smaller and smaller. And that definition is the wrong definition. Because look at you, all of you who are in this room. It's a beautiful site. It's a diverse site. And that's what we have to work for. Work to make sure that at the end of the day, our immigration system works, that more people are able to come legally, that people don't have to wait decades to be reunited with their family, that we uphold human and civil and labor rights, and that we make sure that if somebody is fleeing for their life, that we are a refuge, like we've been for many, many years before. So let's answer the question and be on the right side of history. Let's be those courageous Americans who've answered the question by saying, I want to be that American that made America more just, that made America much more humane, and that basically made sure that everybody who wanted to be an American could be an American. So thank you very much for having me tonight, and I look forward to all your questions and answers.
I just want to say we will open it up now for a brief Q&A. And so we have ushers with microphones who will be going through the aisles. And so if you have a question, please raise your hand and they will hand you the mic. And just because of our limited time, each person will just be allowed one question. And we ask that once you've asked your question, you've hand the mic back to the ushers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, what specific advice would you give to someone who wants to help immigrants and undocumented people in our community?
Well, the first thing that I would say is communicate with your representative. Do you know who your representative is? Your member of Congress? Who is that person? Okay, what was it? Okay, you're from Las Vegas. Okay, so so that's great. So she's supportive. So what you knew, she's as a senator. What we need to pass immigration policies, whether it's the DREAM Act or immigration reform, we need 218 votes from members of Congress, and we need 60 senators to be able to move legislation. We need a majority, but 60 to make sure that we withstand a filibuster. But it's been elusive, I want to say. And right now, I would say to your senator, thank you very much. She's supportive of the DREAM Act, but I believe your other senator, Heller, is not. And we need him to support the DREAM Act and immigration reform. So when you go back home to Las Vegas, I need you to do that. And so every single one of you has a member of Congress that makes decisions. And this is important for me to let everybody know. Immigration policy and law is done at the federal level, not at the state, not at the local. We can actually ameliorate the consequences of our immigration policies at the state and local level, but that happens at the national level. Our members of Congress, our senators, make that decision. So what can you do? Make your voice heard. It matters a lot that you say, I support immigrants. And especially right now with young people who have lost DACA, they need a permanent solution. It would be great to connect with your senator, Senator Heller, and let him know that you support the DREAM Act and a permanent solution for immigrant youth.
I was wondering what you think we should do in response or in preparation for ramifications against sanctuary states that you said is coming in January.
Well, what happened already, we saw sort of a first set of what they called the administration, Department of Homeland Security called it Safe Cities raids. So they've already happened. They are, seek to increase that enforcement against states like California and others. So there's two things. One is to connect with, once again, legislators, letting them know that we will not stand for this kind of enforcement in our communities. And also, I think it's really important in community where you are able to, especially where immigrants are, to really convey how to through, and this is why this is on our website. It's also on YouTube, CHIRLA. There's lots of sets of videos, which is just to really make sure we educate our community about the rights they do have. The number one thing that we seek to let people know is that they do have a right to due process. And most immigrants who get an attorney are able to fight their case. Otherwise, especially if you're from Mexico, you can be deported in 2 or 3 hours from California, from Southern California. One moment you're in your home, living your life, early morning arrest, in the afternoon you're gone. And people are deported with nothing. Many times no money, they're just dropped off on the other side of the border. So it's really important for people to fight their case. And the other part is many times for those friends and family that you might know to also support them to at least get bonded out so that they can fight their case here in this country as opposed to being deported. Once deported, it's almost impossible to seek to be reunited. Mm-hmm.
Are you doing any special efforts to really educate the DACA youth? Because I still see some questions on social media that I feel like really they should already know the answer to that question. Recently, a DACA youth saying, I want to go to Mexico because a family member is ill, how am I going to get back? And really having to have several people on the thread tell her, do not go.
Right.
So I'm wondering how much you're doing to target that population.
So we do. So we, our Immigrant Youth project is both in the high schools as well as in the colleges. And really it's peer-to-peer education, so students educating students. CHIRLA has a legal services program, so we help documented youth with their legal services. So they can, whether it was before in terms of those who could renew, when they were able to submit initial applications, we would help with that. And so we're seeking, especially through social media, through mainstream media, to get information out to our community. The one thing that I want you to understand is that individuals usually had 6 months to renew. When the program was ended on September 5th, those 6 months got collapsed into a month. To this moment, there are still immigrant youth who don't realize that they were impacted by this shift and change. So that is going to be constantly, we're going to have to do constant education. Right now, what I want to tell and what you should tell documented youth, and especially I would say who are on this campus, because there are documented youth in your campus, they are your peers, that you have their back, that you're going to stand with them. That you're going to speak up if they are enforced upon. That if they also need your support in terms of, because they're no longer documented, if their permit might be expiring soon, they're going to lose access to a lot of financial assistance. Luckily in California, we still have access to California financial aid, but many are very worried about access to loans and other things. So I really want you to be supportive and recognize that as their status changes, their ability to stay in school financially changes. So the kind of access that they had is, especially the most important one, is to be able to work. as documented, they had now a social security number. They could lawfully work. That's taken away from them. So that means that how are they going to be successful on college campus? Will they have stipend programs that can allow them to do work study without having that social security number? I just really think it's really important that we also look inward and say, okay, for those documented youth who are no longer protected from deportation, who are now really worried about their future because they know their work permit has suddenly been put into jeopardy, how can we be supportive of our peers, our community members?
2 more questions?
Hi, so my question is, so this past week on the Scripps campus, we encountered people who are very strongly voicing their opinions about anti-immigration. What would you suggest we do or say when we encounter these type of people?
Well, I really do think that, first and foremost, we are a nonviolent movement. I mean, that is certainly where we stand as CHIRLA. And really practice nonviolence is difficult in the face of individuals who are seeking to provoke and attack your very essence of who you are as a human being. But it's really important that our energy be focused elsewhere. And I was actually earlier talking to a group of incredible young women today in one of the classes. We were having this exact conversation. And part of what I really feel is important is the individuals who are being being so ferocious in their attacks, there's a certain rights that they have. At the same time, they don't have a right to attack you physically or to harm your person. And so we have to understand that, in terms of creating a safe space. But I really want you to focus elsewhere. I want you to focus on all the people who are not who aren't taking actions, who are just basically on the sidelines, who aren't activated at this moment. And maybe they support you. Maybe they support immigrant communities, they support many of our progressive causes, but nobody's inviting them to participate. Nobody's saying, hey, get involved. This is the way you can participate and be active. And I really want us to pay much more attention to I would say the most numerous of Americans who are looking for ways to get involved, who have never been invited to be involved, and who can make all the difference in terms of how we can move our country forward. So be safe, be calm, but really our energy has to be focused in terms of our purpose, and again, creating more engagement for those individuals who could support us.
Question. How can we put undocumented immigrants at the forefront of their own political movement when it is so necessary to protect their status and keep it secret from authorities? And will it expose them as undocumented to put them at the forefront of their own movement?
So I started at CHIRLA when I was in my mid-20s, so I'm now, it's sort of 22 years later, here I am. A lot of things have changed over time, and you have a lot of individuals who have they made a decision. It's a decision, and it's a very personal decision, but it's also a community decision to come forward. And I say this to you because being in the shadows and being it's part of the protection, basically not being targeted, not being punished or persecuted. At the same time, what happens is somebody else is defining who you are. And so it's a hard choice, but I think it's a necessary choice, and it's a path and a journey that we all must travel. I didn't talk about my family and my immigration status until I was, I think the first time I ever shared my story was probably my last year in college, that I shared it with anybody. I understood. I felt more confident in my own shoes, in my own space. It takes a long time. The way I'm able to describe what happened, and there's so many other things, it just takes that time, but I think it's so necessary. I think that there's overwhelming support for immigrant youth right now, because many young people had made that choice, that they needed to come forward. They needed to share who they were in their own words, not by somebody else defining who they are, talking about their contributions, but one by one talking about who, what are their dreams? What are their ambitions? Who are they in the community? Many of them are parents. Many of them are just seeking to do so much good. And I think that it becomes important for us to do that. So it's hard, and thank you for that question. I think we have to have respect, create places of safety where people can actually share their stories. But I want you to understand that there are many people who are your friends. You might not know it, and maybe just to be able to say that that is who they are. People who still you are struggling to figure out how to share their full self to you. So just be that person who's a strong ally, who's willing to be supportive in that way. And the other thing that I think is really important is that institutionally we have to ensure that there's safety for those individuals who choose to come forward in that way. And that's not just for immigrant communities, but anybody else, any other community, any other person who feels that being their whole self could put them in jeopardy.